preserve. It's good to see everybody. I am Melissa Sadorf, Executive Director for the Arizona Rural Schools Association, and with me today are Sean Rickert. I have him here as my co-host today. He is the president, and then Dianne Smith, our policy expert for ARSA. And we're going to go ahead, and Sean, I'm going to have you introduce yourself, and then Dianne can also introduce herself. We'll get started.
Awesome. Welcome. My name is Sean Rickert. I'm the superintendent of the Pima Unified School District in Graham County, Arizona, out here in the eastern parts of the state. I am the president of the Arizona Rural Schools Association, and I am excited to be here with you today.
All right. And Dianne?
Good morning. I'm Dianne Smith, and I'm your policy expert. I've been working in the field for a long time, both in education and in the legislative arena. I would say I love combining the two, but that's probably not true. It's always a challenge. But the positive is when we make things work. And so it's just been an honor to work with some new members for me across the state, because I'm really supportive of the rural communities and the rural leaders. So anything I can do to help, I'm here for you.
Thanks, Dianne. And she truly is. So feel free to reach out to her if you've got questions about any of the things that we're going to be talking today as it relates to policy and what's going on with our legislature. Just a few things to bring your attention to. The first is we do have our newsletter that has been going out. Hopefully you're getting that and noticing that there's some things on it that are a little bit different. The first is we are doing photo features of what's going on in your rural school community. So if you have anything that you want to share, please feel free to send me those pictures and give me an explanation on what they're all about, so that we can highlight the good things that are happening out there in your school communities. The second thing is that we, for members, have a job posting board. And so if you are looking to hire people this upcoming school year and you want to have ARSA push out through our website your jobs that you are looking to fill, there is a form that's also linked to that newsletter, and we'll make sure that we get that on our job board. Some basic information about the position and where people that are interested in finding out more can look as far as a link, but do make sure that you take advantage of that, and we're happy to provide that service for our membership. Two more things. The first is that the Teacher of the Year nomination process has begun. And so if you are interested in nominating a rural teacher to be considered for that award, the information is on our website. And we also have been putting it out in the newsletter. Nominations are being accepted through April 15th. So please make sure that you are nominating a rural teacher that is doing good work in your community. And then the last thing, we have done a collaboration with State 48, and we now have an official ARSA t-shirt. So if you are interested in learning more about that, or if you're interested in purchasing one of those, information is also in the newsletter that's been going out. But it's something that we'd love to see. You're representing rural proudly, and the t-shirt is one way to do that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that I can talk to you a little bit about the first point of conversation, which is about our Borderlands Rural Teacher Caucus. I just want to make sure that I give you some information about that. Sean's going to be helping me with that as well. For those of you that did not know, we do have a group of teachers from across the state that we are working with advocacy efforts around, and they are phenomenal. Most of them have been a county level or last year a top 10 finalist for Teacher of the Year. So we know that these are teachers that are really dedicated to their rural communities. And we've been working with them. This is our third year that we've had the Borderlands Rural Teacher Caucus. When it originally started, it was a collaboration between ARSA and the Rural Schools Collaborative, which is a national nonprofit that supports rural education and has a heavy presence around highlighting rural teachers across the country. and then of course our National Rural Education Association. We worked in conjunction with 4 other entities to start this program. We are the only ones still operating. The other 4 have since moved on to other opportunities for their rural teachers, but ARSA continues to be involved in ensuring that we are working with our teachers to help elevate rural voices across our area, not just here in Arizona, but our region as well. There are 3 leadership people involved with the caucus. Obviously, me and Sean are working with Dianne, our policy expert, to ensure that our teachers have the supports needed, as well as the professional learning opportunities to know what to do to advocate within their community, and some different ways that they are able to then launch their own grassroots efforts around their advocacy work. Our goals every year, what we have done is create 5 to 7 policy recommendations for a policy playbook that we put out. And that is what we're continuing to do. And we want to make sure that the efforts are regionalized across the state. So we do have hubs that work with the NAU Rural Resource Center and ARSA, so that we can get an idea of things that are working in different parts of the state, because sometimes context around where you're located does play into those issues and challenges that rural leaders are dealing with and rural teachers are dealing with. And what we want to do is make sure that we are getting data from the field that informs then our policy recommendations. And the teachers are the ones that do this work. This is definitely a grassroots effort. So what we are looking to do through this caucus is obviously empower our educators. It does have an impact on students, because when that rural voice is at the table, then we are looking at things that are coming out of decision making that does have an impact on students, whether good or bad. But we do need to make sure that it's understood that an urban-centric lens is not what's best for rural communities. So having that opportunity to have our teachers raise that concern is good, because it does then have an impact on policy decisions that are being made. And it is something that grows. So when you have teachers that are involved at this level of advocacy, it does spur on others in that school community to get involved as well. So grassroots advocacy efforts, we do have that localized viewpoint of things that are working in a community and not working in a community. And our aim with the caucus is to ensure that we provide them the opportunities to get together and talk around what the data they've collected looks like. What are they doing in their local communities? What are the efforts that they can then raise to policymakers and influencers in terms of decision making that they can at the local level, or the state level, or even the national level, and get involved with those things. This is some of the conversation that we've had. These are just some examples of things that we've talked about. You know, what are the top 3 things in your area that you're concerned about? What's being done about them? Is there anything that we're noticing trends around? For example, teacher recruitment and retention and broadband seem to be things that come up over and over and over again. But what are things that are unique to your particular area of Arizona that potentially is not on anyone else's list that could be something to bring to policymakers and influencers?
And I think one of the key elements here too is, you know, that this is an iterative process that these teachers that are members of the caucus are engaging in. So I mean, they're going out gathering information, and then from that information they're asking questions, and it really it's a great opportunity for this core community of rural education leaders. And that's really what I mean these teachers are becoming, is, you know, that they gather information, and then they know what questions to ask the next time. They're talking to people, you know, extensively over a period of time to put that information all together, and that's a lot of the strength of this process. Anyway, didn't mean to interrupt, Melissa. I just really want to make.
Please. Yep, no, I appreciate that, Sean, because you're right. We've refined what we've done over the past 3 years, and we'll continue to do so based on who's in the caucus and what the needs of the rural schools that they're talking to really are. So it is important to note that it's not just a fixed process. Here are some of the things that we talked with them about as far as their advocacy efforts, things that they do, because it's not just one size fits all. There are different opportunities to engage around their concerns and their issues. And what we are looking at right now is pushing out a survey. You'll see that in our next newsletter. That's asking for your input around these two basic questions. What's working right now, what's not working in your rural schools, and what do policymakers need to know about your school community? And that will be something that you'll be able to do in an online survey. If you're interested in doing a more in-depth dive with one of the caucus members, they are holding listening sessions this month and next to ask those same questions in a digital or a virtual meeting setting so that they can go further into the issues and context around what you're concerned. And those are things that they'll be offering. There's a place in that online survey for you to say, yes, I'm interested in participating in a listening session. And then one of the members will reach out to you to schedule that time. I do want
so much.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's so much of the strength. I mean, it gives them that opportunity to be listening to their peers, both peers in their local community that they connect with through their efforts, but then also as ARSA is gathering individuals that want to participate in the conversation, and then filtering those individuals either to teacher members of the caucus or through Melissa's efforts to gather information. I mean, so we're kind of opening the door up with these listening sessions to get all of this information from across the state that can be used to help understand what really are the challenges. So yeah.
No, that's a good point. And training them on this means that they now have that skill set that they can apply to other areas of their work. So we're building advocates across the state. I do want to highlight that on January 19th, we did have our inaugural advocacy workshop. Sean and Dianne and I were able to lead a group of superintendents, other leaders, as well as the caucus members through some training around advocacy efforts. And I do encourage you to look for that. Next year, we'll have another gathering like that in Phoenix. And it was pretty successful, so we hope that you're able to join us. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
Melissa, can I say something?
Please do.
Okay, this is awesome in so many areas. Number one, it shows the collaboration between teachers and administration. So when you're dealing with policymakers, they always like to pit administrators against teachers. And so this effort it's just so valuable, and it's also valuable for the teachers to be able to really learn what it means to advocate. And one of the comments that was made on January 19th was, wow, I didn't know there was a difference between lobbying and advocacy. There's a huge difference between the two, and that you can do a lot more than you think you can do, which helps. The other thing, coming from a political standpoint, legislators love to hear from teachers. They don't always treat them well, but they would rather hear from teachers than administrators. So this process of working together, I just think it's just amazing. And the teachers, I was able to be on a couple calls with the teachers, and they're just really just great advocates and dedicated. And that's what we need our policymakers, both in your local areas, the state level, and then I know Melissa and Sean work at the federal level. But it just shows again this collaboration, because they do the divide and conquer all the time in the political arena. So this is really, really strong. And I'm going to say this, I haven't mentioned this to Sean and Melissa because I just thought about it. We may think about doing this advocacy conference more in November or December, even before session starts. The thing that was positive doing it in January is we had the governor's state of the state, and we had her budget proposal. So we may think about that, but we could do it in two different pieces. But I really love the comment when someone said, wow, I don't have to be afraid of this because we're not really lobbying. And then you're working with whoever you meet in the grocery store, wherever you're at. And the rural voice, I will just tell you, if I hear rural once a day listening to the legislature, I probably hear it 50 times, literally. So they do want to hear from you all. And as Sean always mentions, there's a difference between Yuma rural, like Havasu, Chen Li. But again, we're going to try to really collect those, and so that we're always aware of the differences and yet try to find some consensus areas. So I just think this Borderlands Rural Teacher Caucus is very, very important. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, and I think one of the things, and don't forget, we last year we also did our first kind of advocacy pre-conference in September. I mean, now October, but although the pre-conference, I don't know, we're right there at the end of September, beginning of October. But when we do that annual conference up in Flagstaff, we've kind of arranged to take some time before that opening reception to give, again, that same group the opportunity to kind of come together and talk, for about half a day about what's in the pipeline. Last year, we really focused on the AEL solution because that was something that Melissa had worked on. I'd been involved in. Dianne had really spearheaded. Greg Wyman from J.O. Coombs, the somewhat rural J.O. Coombs, but the very rural Greg Wyman. We were able to come together with a bunch of people and have some good conversations about that. So that's kind of where we've found those opportunities to have those conversations. And I think that's a lot of the value. And again, some people are looking to have an opportunity to hear what Dianne has to say, what Melissa has to say, and to tolerate what I have to say. And then there's some people who, are looking for opportunities to increase their voice. And that's really, those are the ones we really want to empower and commit with or connect with, both, in the fall at the conference, in the winter at the advocacy get together. I mean, every month, through these conversations, because there's a ton of stuff going on, and we don't always catch all of it. Although now that we have Dianne on board, we miss a lot less of it. So.
And to that point, Dianne, since we've laid the groundwork for our conversations around what's happening in Phoenix, do you want to go ahead and give us an update on what's in play right now, things that leaders need to be aware about, and give them an opportunity to ask any questions if they have them?
Yes. If you're looking over the report, I know it gets longer and longer. Pretty soon it'll get shorter and shorter as bills drop off. Keep in mind, and I think I put that in the last little blurb, nothing is ever dead until sine die, which is end of session. You have no idea how many ways it can come back. And even for people that are watching the legislature, it could come back as a strike everything on a bill you're not even watching. So there's a lot of ways. It's kind of interesting. There's more bills this year in both the House and Senate that they're running at the same time, which what I assume they will do when they get ready to go to third reading, they will substitute and then vote for either the House bill or the Senate bill. That's an interesting strategy. But this week, last week was crossover week, but I have to tell you, this week there have been, that's why my update isn't completed yet, so many bills that were in committee of the whole and third reading and still need to be in committee of the whole and third reading from the original chamber. Although the Senate committees are starting to, or the opposite committees are starting to meet this week, but the agendas are pretty light because there's still a lot of other bills that are moving. A lot of controversial issues. The biggest issue is the number of HCRs and SCRs, and that's House concurrent resolution and Senate concurrent resolutions. And those are policies that they send straight to the voters, and literally it's to get around the governor from vetoing them. So some of them have a bill that they know she'll veto, but they're also doing an HCR and SCR, which bypasses her. And I'm telling you, the ballot is going to be filled with ballot measures, which is going to confuse a lot of people, which may be their point, although some of these they would like to really have passed. But that's a different dynamic. They usually try to avoid as much going to the ballot, especially in 2024, because it's kind of an important election in 2024. In case you didn't get the information, the presidential primary that's coming up, you can only vote if you're a Republican, registered as a Republican or a Democrat. It's the only election that independents cannot vote. And we've already passed the time where you could switch, because some people, a lot of people are independents, but they switch to one of the other parties so that they can vote in the presidential primary. So that'll be coming up. I think it's March 19th, but I don't have that sheet right in front of me. Okay, good. Thank you. That's really important. The other thing that they did is they've already moved up the primary election about a week, because it has to do with the timing of counting the votes, and Arizona's a little slower in doing that. So that timing, but then you can flip back if you want to be an independent or no party affiliation, whatever you want. And then you choose your ballot, whether you want a Republican ballot, a Democrat ballot in the primary. That's for the primary. So you can decide. I will say this, some people use this very strategically. And so they may be a diehard Democrat, but they want to impact the Republican primary. So they may switch to being a Republican, get a Republican primary ballot, and influence the outcome of that. Some don't, but there's a lot of people that do that. It's a strategy. The other thing I will say, every chance I have an opportunity, if you don't vote in November, vote in the primary. Many of the legislative districts are decided in the primaries. Literally, that's true. I'm going to say 70%, but I don't remember what the number is. Doesn't matter. Very high number. The primary, voting in the primary is so much more important. And then, of course, voting in November, I always, everybody needs to vote. But some people think, oh, and now it's going to be at the end of July. You may be on vacation, but they're trying to take away your option to do mail-in ballots and everything, which I don't think is going to happen. Just a long-term note for some of you, it was the Republicans who brought in mail-in voting. They brought, and at the time, I thought, well, this is really kind of interesting. Now they realize there's so many people on both sides of the aisle voting. Now they don't like the mail-in ballots. They want everything to be done at a polling place. So it's just kind of interesting how things go kind of full circle. So that's kind of the issues around voting. Makes a difference. I will just say this, and again, it's not a political statement. It's just a statement. There are a lot of folks that are hoping that the Democrats take over either in the House or the Senate. There's a good chance the Senate could go 15-15, which means it's a split government, which we had years ago. And Randall Gannett, who was a Republican, was the the president. There's been some talk, this is only rumor, but I want to put it into context because Ken Bennett has been really good because he comes from Yavapai. He's very good with the rural communities. But it's been interesting that he's been giving some nod to the Democrat bills, which pretty soon he'll be labeled a rhino by his own party, and he, will be kind of neutered in his own party. But some people are saying, well, maybe he's doing that in case it's a 15-15 split. If he makes his primary, that maybe he could, be the president-elect in a split. There's all of these different scenarios that impact why it's important to get your people out to vote. And there's nothing wrong with sending out information to people just talking about the voting. The Secretary of State's office, whether it was under Republican or Democrat, if you call them, they will come out. They will even come out and talk about some of the ballot measures. So we'll talk more about that as we get closer. All right. So does anybody have any specific question on a specific bill before I highlight a couple?
I'm monitoring the chat and I don't see anything yet, Diane.
Okay, so one of the bills I want to talk about is 1058. Oops, let me get my other pile here. That's the bill that's going through on adding school finance as a part of the graduation, making it a half a credit. It's been very controversial. There was a huge, I'll just show this. Oh, well, I don't know whether to get farther away. Anyways, whatever. There's a huge floor amendment that went through. So a lot of the ed organizations were doing what sometimes we consider helping a bad bill be better and not as bad. Now that's not good English, I get that. But, so instead of trying to kill it, because Senator Mesnard and of course Kimberly Yee, state treasurer, are very important in the school finance, having students learn more about school finance. So the amendment got on. We'll see what happens. The other thing that we're concerned about is we're hearing that the governor's office may in fact sign this bill, which traditionally we would think the Democrat would veto it, but we're hearing that she might sign it if it's, better than what's your term, Sean, about A to F? The worst, the best of the worst situation.
The least worst option.
Yeah, there you go. The least worst option. So there are still concerns. Again, there's a process. I actually happened to miss the State Board of Ed on Monday. The State Board of Ed is trying to accelerate their process to look into this. And what a lot of education experts say, we don't want the legislature to start dictating standards and accountability. And that's what's happening. We really want that to be housed at the State Board of Ed, working with the Department of Ed. So that's just a bill that I know we're all going to be watching to see what the final outcome is. A lot of bills on transgender, biological sex, all of those, they're literally, I think there's 5 or 6 moving. Going back to Senator Bennett, he voted on the bills that they were moving, probably thinking the governor will end up vetoing them. I don't know his mindset, but probably. But the important piece is he did vote no on the SCR, so it failed. And he said in Senate Ed, when the bill went through Senate Ed, that he would vote yes to get it out of committee, but he would probably vote no on the floor. And he did vote no. So the one that would go to the ballot right now is dead. The other bills are moving. But again, I don't want to assume anything, but it's probably likely that when they get to the governor's office, if they do, that she would veto those. Just a lot of issues around those bills.
Hey,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sean.
No, that's okay. Before we jump onto the next thing though, going back to school finance for just a second. Because I don't know how many people, as far as, superintendents in the room, but, if this is something that you're talking to legislators about, there's a couple key points that you might want to bring up with them. One of them obviously is that right now there's nothing that prevents a school district governing board from requiring students to take a personal finance class as part of their graduation requirements. I mean, that's or incorporating personal finance into, a required math class, or, I mean, there's a million ways that school districts can address the need to teach students about, banking and budgeting and, how not to get ripped off, or end up in bankruptcy court. But this bill in many ways, all it does is it limits the options that education leaders have by saying you have to do it this way. And that's, to my way of thinking, that's never a good thing. Because given, your particular circumstances, especially for rural districts, I mean, how are you going to find somebody that has an endorsement in personal finance? How are you going to find somebody that, that this is in their expertise? But there's ways to do it. And if it fits in, again, we have to prioritize the resources we have. And I hate it when the legislature tries to tell us what our priorities should be, because they're not looking at the big picture that we're looking at. So anyway, those are just some of the talking points on that subject that I would take to the conversation I'm going to have with with my representatives about personal, the personal finance requirement. And I don't know if anybody else, again, part of the advantage of a roundtable is if other people have other things that they would, want to make sure that they would raise as causes for concern, or causes for support. I mean, I feel, I mean, I do feel like if this passed, it wouldn't be the end of the world, because requiring students to learn these things has value. And part of our job is making sure that the students graduate high school prepared to be successful. So,
Well, the one thing
I don't
that
know.
I'll say, Sean, is that when you are looking at CTE programs that do count as electives and taking away an elective, what you potentially are doing is impacting students' ability to finish a certification program or get what they need before they leave high school. And that is a workforce development issue for a lot of our rural communities, because those CTE programs are in place in large part due to the needs of the local surrounding community. And so just taking that one semester credit, that half credit away, can impact our rural school communities, not just.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's part of the backstory on the whole thing, is that, the proposal is that, you would be reducing the number of elective credits that students would have. We're not going to increase it from 22 to 22 and a half. We're going to go from, having whatever it is, 10 elective, slots to having 9.5 elective slots, because personal finance is required. And that does get in the way with your number of completers. It gets in the way with your certifications for other programs. Your exploratory options, all of those things, fine arts. I mean, it impacts, again, a big picture that we are familiar with and members of the legislature often are not.
Correct.
And the other thing, so when I responded to some, just neutral, we were neutral. The other piece that both Sean and Melissa brought up too, for the rurals, broadband's a big issue. So if you don't have the teachers to do it, and you don't really want it to be another online class, because we're trying to do quality programs with teachers. So those were the three issues that I brought up to Senator Mesnard, and I'm sure other people have also. But from a rural perspective, that's what we said. You can already do it now, which was interesting because the Mesa School District had 2 or 3 teachers there talking about, how great this was and how it impacted but nobody said, oh, well, look, they already could do that. We don't need a mandate to do it. So we talked about you can already do it now. Again, the elective, taking up an elective is really important. And the issue of, again, it was my understanding that the lobbyist group that was really pushing this, even though they tried to say it wasn't a vendor bill, but it was, he just was surprised when we said to him, well, there's not broadband and good connectivity across the state. And it was like, because he doesn't work in that arena. So other issues that you guys have that you want us to keep using, we're going to keep watching the bill because it could make it through. Now they did extend it. Sorry, let me just tell you that they extended it to 2030 so that it would start with these incoming classes and stuff. And I know people always think, well, by then it'll go away, but in the meantime, the State Board of Ed is going to be working with ADE and try to come up with something that stakeholders are working on and something that would be valuable. But any other input from you guys would be awesome. Okay, so that was a big one. Let's see. Oh, so Stephanie's not on the call, but there's a couple bills out there that impact O3 schools. Are there any on this call?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So that's
For those of you that aren't O3 schools, those are basically your K-8 elementary districts, as opposed to unified districts or union high school districts.
that don't have Melissa, this is correct, right? They're K-8 districts that are not technically connected to any specific high school.
Correct. Yes.
Oh, so in Yavapai County, this has been talked about for like 10 years, so I tried to avoid it, but now I can't avoid it right now. They are trying to last year they came up with what they thought was a solution for this. It really gouged taxpayers. It was really a huge unintended consequence. So we have a bill moving through the House, 2173, that tries to fix what didn't work last year. There are two bills in the Senate, one specifically by David Gowan, who really wants to just repeal it and go back to where they were at. A compromise that we have been talking about, but it hasn't gotten into a bill yet, is to change it for the tax rate. They would just charge half of the high school QTR. So that's like 0.85, I think. And that seems to work. In the Yavapai area, I was told by both Stephanie and Michelle that at least helps most districts. I haven't heard from anybody else across the state. So we're watching that really closely because our dear friend Tim Carter, who is awesome, and this will be his last year. He's not running again, but this is kind of a go home bill for him. And he's a part of the bigger conversation of some of the problematic language. And so we want to work with him. We don't want to work against him, but it's a taxpayer issue. And so that will grab hold of a lot of Republicans, legislators. So right now, I'm just going to use the word fluid and we'll just see how that plays out. But I'm following it very closely. Gretchen Jacobs works with the rural schools that are 600 and less. Mark Barnes works with another group of Yavapai. So I've been coordinating with all of them, and both Sean and Melissa have reached out to Tim Carter, so we make sure we include him in the conversations. But if any of you have any other thoughts or information, please let us know. All right, so that's a good bill. The other thing I'm trying to watch the time too. The other main issue you probably want to know about is Prop 123 extension. So there's three main areas. The governor, of course, wants to expand it to 8.9%. The Senate wants to keep it at 6.9 and only teachers. And the House right now wants to lower it to 5.5% instead of 6.9, and again, keep it to just teachers. Now, I always hate to say off the record, but people I've been talking with, you know, the Teachers Association has been trying to include all of your other staff into the, you know, whatever goes out to Prop 123. I think they realize that might not happen and it might be a detriment to the bill. I'm not saying they're backing away from feeling that way because all of your other staff people are still members of the Teachers Association. I don't like to use the word union. Um, Interesting note that I just found out yesterday. AEA is going to go through another change. Their current executive director, Randy Perez, has resigned and will be leaving at the end of June. And this will be like their third or fourth or fifth executive director they've had in about 5 or 6 years. It's kind of a revolving door. Randy, his claim to fame is he helped to, uh, let's see, get someone to beat Russell Pierce after the 1070s. So he has a lot of political experience. Dianne's opinion, he came into AEA very union centric. Everything was union strong, whatever. They even put that on a lot of their stuff, you know. So really interesting, tried to really unite. A lot of teachers are no longer members of AEA, but a lot of your support staff, that's where they're gaining some members because so that's why they want to make sure that they include everybody, which we know is important. Right now, I wouldn't give you a bet on any of the three. I just don't know because at this point, they're really not into budget negotiations. And the governor's office, except on a couple bills, we haven't heard a lot out of the governor's office since her state of the state and her budget. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I'm afraid the 5.5 is going to go because that seems where the Republicans, especially in the House, are headed, which we know is not as good. Not sure if that would, when they put it to the ballot, whether that would address the triggers. So they're trying to take those triggers out that said if the state spends a certain proportion in K-12 funding, they could cut your base support level. Which at the time, of course, they all said, oh, this will never happen, but we're getting closer and closer. So there's a lot of issues, again, still fluid, and the bills have still not been voted out of either House or Senate. So, and they may not, they may just sit there so that they have the negotiations. Any questions that I can try to answer? Those, that's kind of the biggest issues on the Prop 123.
Questions on 1, 2, 3?
Do we think that the governor would veto it if that 5.5 came to fruition?
They can't because it's going to be an HCR to go to the ballot.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I know. I'm telling you, I've been doing this a long time. I've never seen so many HCRs and SCRs, and we know exactly why they're doing it. So yeah, that's why, you know.
And normally we wouldn't think that there could possibly be two of those options on the ballot. But Arizona may be just dysfunctional enough to actually end up with, you know, with the asking voters, do you prefer 5.5 to 6 point, what was it? 6.7, 6.9. I mean, which you can't really do because all you can do is ask them yes or no on both questions, in which case they could say no on both questions, which would be the worst case scenario. I mean, obviously, you know, this is going to go to the voters, and if there isn't strong support, I mean, we know that Prop 123, which should have been a slam dunk, I mean, didn't increase anybody's taxes, didn't cost a nickel, gave money where voters had, in every poll that had been done, said they needed money. and it still didn't pass by more than, was 52, 53%.
51%.
51. So, we definitely have, lots of reasons to try to encourage people in the legislature to A, nail this down, and B, sign die so that we can start a campaign to get it to pass. Because the longer this gets drug out, the more contentious it gets, the more confusion. Because then people start saying bad things about the 5.5 proposal. Oh, we don't like that proposal because it's not enough. Or bad things about the 6.9 proposal. Oh, we don't like that, it's irresponsible. I mean, whatever the bad things are that people are going to say, the more of that gets said, the more voters get turned off on the idea of voting yes for the solution to this fiscal cliff that's created by 1, 2, 3. So.
And the other thing is when Governor Ducey did this, state treasurer was, oh my gosh, he just got booted from the Republicans.
Jeff DeWitt.
Jeff DeWitt, yes, okay. He was treasurer and he warned, oh, this is terrible, this is terrible. But it hasn't been terrible because the state land trust fund continues to grow. So of course, Kimberly Yee's current state treasurer is saying, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, sky is falling. And with her actuarial studies and everything, you can only do between 4.5 and 5.5, which is probably, in Diane's humble opinion, bogus. But, people that want to lower it, but as Sean says, I mean, and even the 8.9 is probably very, very doable, but they're not going to want to give the governor the credit for doing the 8.9. But literally, it's probably doable. So we'll just keep watching this. And it's a good thing. I go back to what Melissa was saying and Sean about the 1058. It's important to talk to your business communities. I know a lot of you go to your Rotaries and all of that stuff. You need to talk to them because the workforce, it's like this makes a difference with their workforce. It drives me nuts that they are not working closer with public education to say we cannot have an educated workforce and the Arizona economy to be expanded if we don't wrap around our K-12 systems. And with ESSER dollars going away, there's just a lot that we're going to be just negative financial opportunities. The fact that some of the districts now are losing their bonds and overrides in Republican areas, which is scary. There's bills that we won't have time to talk about, but they're on the list where they want to say if your bond election doesn't pass by a certain percentage, it doesn't it doesn't go into effect. It's like, oh, so you're going to just disregard all of the other people that voted. There's just a lot of these things churning on school finance on top of school finance in general, including school facilities board. I think I mentioned this the last time, but the school facilities board, I spoke with the Callie, who's up there now, and they're down to about $8 million in the school facilities fund, and they're concerned about how much they may or may not get because of the budget crisis. And so we've got districts out there that have roofing problems and other issues. So keep asking for what you need because we need to put the pressure on, but we're back to, wow, we're not sure if there's enough money in there. So that part is all important, including whether we look at the alternative funding proposal that Sean and some people have worked on, that for rural districts, they could select the charter funding or different funding so that they will not go out for a bond and override because many of you guys can't get them passed anyway. So that's still swirling, but not really moving.
And to that point, Diane, I will say that one of the things that we've put out is a call for schools that are interested in being on the Crumbling Schools tour, because a picture shows 1,000 words as far as that goes. we want to make sure that people know what the state of our facilities are. And if they can't see it, they are probably not going to believe it. I know, Peter, you've had people that have come out to your buildings to take a look at the gaps in your in your walls and those kinds of things. I know Robbie has had the same thing up in Holbrook, and had people come out and take a look. And when they see it and realize how bad it really is, that's when you start getting action. And so if you are interested in being a part of that Crumbling Schools tour, reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat, but it's melissa@azruralschools.org. And we'll make sure that you're signed up so that we can get people out to see your buildings. Yeah, and Peter's showing you the gap in his office. That is his wall, and you can see through that gap. There's
Oh my word.
his building.
Yeah,
Like
I
that.
put foam in there so that the crickets didn't come through from the outside. I put my hand in there and I can touch the stucco on the outside of my building.
Yeah. And that's
So-
the state of some of our rural facilities. And people need to see it.
Yeah, I'm only 15 years old. I'm not some of the older schools.
Oh, you're not even in a 20-year life cycle of a building.
No, I'm in a
Was she-
gorgeous brand new school.
Are you, were you school facility money built?
Yes.
Oh, and I've seen that before, but it does shock you when you, I mean, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, our governing board room, I can put basically a big rectangle. I can put my hand underneath the divider wall and reach into the other room and pull the drywall out. So
Oh my
it's fun.
Wow. Well, thanks, Melissa, because that's true. Get them out there to see it. And especially, this is terrible, but especially if you're in Republican areas, because they can't blame the Democrats, sorry, for not doing anything because the Republicans were in charge for 8 years. And they did add more money. But we're really at the point where we probably need $1 billion in deficiency corrections again, just deficiency corrections, and the demolish and rebuild that would even save them some money. So thank you for that show and tell. That was really good. All right, we're kind of getting close. The one other thing I want to mention, because there's a lot of other things in here, the Title 15 cleanup bill so far is not moving. I hate to say I told you so, but Sean and I told Senator Bennett that like in September, I think. And the interesting thing is just what we said. It's the Republicans. The Democrats were for it, but some of the Republicans like Bullock said, oh, well, I put that in there about the special day for civics education. I don't want that just thrown into a group. And Wasak said, yeah, I added, so they're looking at it. I don't know if it's going to move. What happened in the House is they pared it down to giving ADE the authority to look at some reports and maybe combine them or whatever. But I have to tell you, I could go back and show you a list from probably 15 years ago where we did a report of the reports and nothing really happens. I mean, nothing is ever new under the sun, especially for old timers like me. I mean, I've seen this stump come around. So, I mean, it would be okay for them to do that. But a lot of the bigger things, although there were some things in that bill that I didn't think would ever pass anyways, like taking out the ability for the Joint Legislative Audit Committee to, rip you guys a new one, because that's usually what they do with their audit overviews and everything. So, but it's a bill that I will tell you, they had a bipartisan group that worked on this for probably 6 months, with thinking this would be positive with Bennett and Marsh and some of them. So I'm following that bill, but I don't know what's going to happen. So there's a lot of other things, and I'll get it updated by the end of the week. But Melissa, unless anybody else will, I think that kind of hits some of the highlights.
Yeah. Thank you, Diane. And do, when you get those reports from her, reach out if you have any questions. She's very willing to help you understand, provide talking points for you. Also talk through how does that work in your context, because your your location matters as far as how some of these bills would play in your local community. The other thing I will say, and it's not on Diane's report, but it's something to be aware of. As you know, our grant allocations come out on Friday, and there's been some talk out of ADE around Title I and the amount of money that potentially could be reduced. I think it was 5% or 7% reduction across the board for the state. And so that's something just to be aware of. There's not been any definite information coming out of ADE around that. But it is something where the state has been reduced in their total allocation, $15 million. That is obviously going to have an impact on our allocations at the LEA level. And the really interesting point in a recent PowerPoint that was put out by the department is that they made a note, it was the final bullet, that they're getting timely data submissions from you could have an impact on your allocations. And I'm not sure what exactly the data they're talking about is, but just something to be aware of. So when those allocations hit your GME on Friday, make sure that you take a look and see what's going on with your Title I funding, if you are eligible for Title I funding. So, yeah, Diane,
Melissa, can I say one more thing? Because that's really awesome. One thing I wanted to mention, we talked about this at the advocacy workshop, and it has worked for a lot of districts. We really encourage districts to put a one-pager together, and not paragraphs, bullets, but a one-pager on your district, and talk about your successes, then talk about your challenges. And, and Cole Young has told me, because I worked with him on this months ago, he's like, he has used that everywhere. And if you want us to send out a sample and send out the one Cole did, or if you guys have one, do you have one? That's great, because it really is effective. Peter?
I would love to see a sample.
Perfect.
Because I would like to see what other districts are putting out there so that I can make sure my one pager isn't irrelevant or off kilter. So any kind of examples ARSA could supply would be awesome.
we can do that.
Perfect. We can, yeah, because it was just interesting, because I really kind of pushed Cole into doing this, a couple of months ago. And then now he's just like, oh my gosh, I use this everywhere. And it's just easy, and it's easy for any policymaker anywhere. Again, bullet points, don't put a lot of verbiage, because even though they took third grade reading, they don't, and they get so many things. But he just said, and I told him, put successes and then put 3 to 5. So we'll get something out on that. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Well, if there are no other questions, we are at the top of the hour. It's been wonderful to spend some time with you today. Do look for our newsletters coming out and let us know how we can support you. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.